Welcome to the Reclaim Leader podcast. I'm Jason Tucker.
And I'm Jesse Skiffington.
We're two pastors in the trenches who are passionate about church health for greater gospel impact.
We share the ups and downs of ministry, strategies that worked for us,
and some that didn't.
Best practices and practical tools for church leadership.
The goal, to help all of our churches flourish. Let's get started.
See another sunrise, sing a little song.
Welcome back to the Reclaim Leader. Jesse, it is good to see you again. Springtime here in New Jersey. Let's go. We're ready.
Come on.
I think all of our folks are kind of waking up after their winter slumber now that we're post-Easter and we're creeping close to Memorial Day weekend, which for us is a big weekend because we got the beach season here.
Is that when summer starts for you guys? Because summer doesn't start for us till July 1st. So we got a ways to go.
And you guys can never go in the water. It's like,
Yeah, it's 48 to 52 degrees. So once it gets towards 52, it's really nice and warm for us out here.
Well, listen, I love this topic today because one of the things, when we were at that conference together, just hanging out and laughing and connecting with other pastors just reminded me of how sorely I have missed that. Mm-hmm. It's been a while, and getting to connect brought me so much joy. It really did. I feel like I'm still riding on that, and it's amazing how it changes the way you approach a lot of things. Mm-hmm. But I think it's probably because of how I'm wired, but I'm always looking at the challenges.
Yeah, totally.
And if that's all I'm doing, there's a certain amount of joy in solving those problems, but it's like I'm just getting constantly bombarded with all the broken things. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's particularly healthy either. So I love this topic today, how leaders can find joy again.
Yeah, and I think it's important because joy it does a lot of things for us. I think it helps our creativity. It keeps us going. It makes our ministry sustainable. It helps us to remember why we're doing what we're doing and that it actually matters and those things. But we can lose joy pretty easily too in the grind. I mean, you're talking about just the grind of ministry, the busyness of ministry, the checklists of ministry. And over time, I think it kind of has this, if we don't come up for air and think about our joy in our work, we can find ourselves in a place where there's not a lot of joy in our work. And we're moving not towards sustainability and vitality in our work, but actually towards things like burnout or apathy or places where we just don't want to be, especially in ministry. So we're going to be talking about joy at work. And I just want to acknowledge, Jason, I don't know where you are when it comes to joy at work or where our listeners are. And so I want to be sensitive to that because you might be at a place where you're like, man, joy at work, that sounds like a pipe dream. I don't even know what that would be like. Or maybe you're like, yeah, I love my work. I'm enthusiastic. I'm having a blast. It's joyful. It's fun. So I don't know, people are in probably different places with this whole thing. But I think it's easy for joy to begin to fade in our work unless we're attentive to the kinds of practices that can keep it present in our work. And I was thinking about, especially in the lead up to Easter, it's a lot that we're doing from Palm Sunday to Easter Sunday, and kind of cranking it out. And one of the things that caused me, I was just a little grumpy getting into the Easter mode. I mean, this is not good. Like pastors, this should be our most joyful right? Or something, right? But it's like, we got to do that. We got to be creative about the Good Friday service. And we do the same thing we did last year? And then we're talking about how do we incorporate kids on Easter and families together, and what are we going to do to make sure they feel included? And then we were debriefing an event that we had, which went pretty well, but then the focus was on the 5 things that didn't go well. And I'm just kind of was over it and going, why am I feeling that way? And what should be really this joyful, exciting season. And what put it over the top for me is when one of our awesome staff team who does great work, if you're listening, I love you and you're awesome, but walked into my office and was like, hey, do you have the outline for the May and June sermon series yet for me? And I was just like, on top of everything else, I was like, right now I need to do this. But anyway, so it's easy. You can tell, maybe I need to work on joy in my ministry, which is why this came up, Jason. But it's easy for things to come along and rob us of joy in our ministry. And I know that hasn't ever happened to you. So, but for other pastors like me, maybe it has. And we don't want to work and live from that place in our ministry. We want to have joy. So that's why we're talking about this today.
I love it, because if you think back to and I think you're going to get to this, but when you think back to like when you first got into ministry,
right,
that fire that was inside of you and that excitement to preach for the first time and to do all these things. And there's something about those seasons in our lives in ministry that feels sort of magical. And it's not that we have to go back and try to recreate that, but you sort of wonder what has happened to us and to our ability to lead well if we're in a joyless place. And then more importantly, what do we do about it? How do we get some of that fire back? There's a great sermon at the end of the conference that we were at. Pastor John Fullerton, who's the pastor at the hosting church in Lakeland, Florida. He gave a sermon. He was talking about the fire in the bones and how, you can't help but say, you have to say what God's calling you to say. And he was talking about his call to seminary and said that his pastor, he was like an intern or something. I don't remember the full details, but he was thinking about seminary, and the pastor came up to him and he thumped him on the chest. He goes, do you have that fire? Can you not go to seminary? And he's like, I don't know, fire. He goes, come back to me when you got the fire. And I guess every couple of months he'd come up to him and like pound him on the chest, be like, do you have that fire yet? And eventually he got to a place where he came and he pounded him on the chest.
Oh, did he?
I got the fire.
Yeah, I don't know if we're allowed to do that anymore.
Probably not. But
the point is,
I love the idea.
Yeah, well, and even you and I remember when we were getting toward the end of seminary, and Gordon Graham, one of our professors that we really enjoyed spending time with, he basically said to us, don't let it become a job. And ministry is hard. And if it's just work, if just the tedium of checklists and another sermon to preach and another study to lead and another person to visit in the hospital or whatever, it can become drudgery. It can become a weight that's too much for us. And of course, in the context of this whole conversation, we want to remember that where the source of our joy really is found in our own relationship with the Lord and all those things. But I think there are some things that we can do to cultivate the joy of the Lord in our life and the joy of our work. And I think one distinction would be that joy does not necessarily equal like exuberance and enthusiasm and hype. Joy is not like this, I'm so excited for all the things, but joy is sort of this deeper place of connection to the meaning and the purpose and the impact of your work. I love this work that I get to do. I'm joyful because I get to be a part of what God is doing in this world, or I get to be a part of these impactful moments in someone's life or in their family life, from baptism to marriages and to funerals, and to kind of recapture the sense of the significance of your work. So joy is not just like bouncing around, like excitement. It's a deeper place of sense of connection or meaning in the purpose in your work. And I would say when you have that, and when you're able to kind of cultivate that sense of joy or that connectedness to the purpose of your work, it actually has a pretty significant ripple effect with your ministry teams, your elders, and others, that people can sense when you're feeling joyful or when you're feeling connected to your work and excited about it or passionate about it or committed to it. And they also can sense when that is missing or it's drifting and you're just sort of putting in the work. And I think there's moments where we do that, where we kind of have the drudgery. So when we lose our joy, when we lose sort of the sense of meaning and purpose in our work that gives us joy in our work, I think that's where some of the alarm bells need to go off for us.
Yeah.
What's missing? Why is that? Because if it goes for too long like that, that's where things like cynicism and fatigue and maybe even burnout and those things kind of come when we haven't been attentive to joy in our ministry. And we set out saying, and maybe you're not in a place where you feel a lot of joy in your ministry. I think there are seasons we go through where we go, I'm not feeling a lot of joy in my ministry. So what does that mean? Well, I think it means you need to pay attention and just go, what's that about? And what's going on in me and in ministry that is causing me to feel that way?
Yeah. Well, okay. Sorry, folks. That was a long windup, but I'm going to let Jesse pitch. I'm sorry if I made that longer than it needed to be. What are some ways that leaders can recover some joy? What are some things that kind of you were thinking?
Yeah. So I think first thing maybe you do if you want to recover some joy is to think about what's draining your joy. Yeah, where's the drudgery stuff that is just robbing you of joy? Like I was talking about being in that meeting and we were debriefing and we're going through details after details. And I just felt my joy level kind of going shrinking down. And I think being aware of those things so that you can kind of manage around that. So a couple of joy killers, maybe we call them, or joy diminishers, maybe, is when we just run from thing to thing to thing. The constant urgency, I think, can rob us of joy. And I would say that's when we haven't been strategic about how we manage our time. That's probably another podcast episode. But when we just kind of run from thing to thing to thing and we feel like we're constantly chasing our to-do lists and our schedule and we're not on top of it. And I would say even in this is where maybe we start to forget things. We're feeling guilty. We didn't respond to an email. We know that we need to decide this, or we need to make progress on this project or this sermon or whatever. And we're just chasing. Yeah. And so that, I think, is a joy killer. I don't know. Is that, you've probably been down that road before? Different seasons.
I feel very seen. Yeah. Yeah. This is, you feel like your calendar's running your life.
Right.
And there is only so long that you can sustain that and still feel a sense of joy about it.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the other piece here is alongside of that is when maybe you're not getting any helpful feedback or positive feedback. And you're like, what's it all for? And so I would say, not that you need somebody to be patting you on the back all the time and telling you good job and all that, but I think you do need to cultivate some meaningful, helpful feedback, and even some places where you can go to hear how grateful people are for what you're doing. Not in this self-aggrandizing kind of way, but just in an encouraging way that reminds you that what you're doing does make a difference. And so I have this, I think I've talked about this before, but I keep a positive comments file folder. So if I get like a nice email or a note or something, I file it, because there are times when I need to go back and remember all the things that have gone well and the ways that God has worked through me to make a difference in someone's life or whatever. And it kind of reconnects me to that sense of purpose. So, not taking time to celebrate or when someone says thank you to you, to really stop and acknowledge it and to go, yeah, thank you for saying thank you, because that's helpful. Sometimes, Jason, especially I think if you're a solo pastor, there's things that you end up doing that are not in line with your wiring. It's out of necessity. Yeah. You're wearing so many hats. And I would say just being attentive to where are we working that's out of alignment with our wiring, or like the things that we love to do. And sometimes we have to do that work. But can you arrange your role to where you're spending more of your time on the things that you love and are passionate about in ministry, and you're doing what we might call scaffolding around those other things, or finding other ways to accomplish those tasks that need to get done. Last one I would mention is kind of a combo thing, either isolation or comparing yourself to someone else. Isolation in ministry, we experienced this in COVID. You and I talked about this here on the podcast, but when we're disconnected from the people that we serve and share life and relationship with, it starts to go, what is this all for? Yeah. What's the purpose? What's the meaning? And it just sucks our joy away. So if you're finding yourself there, it might mean you just need to get out of your office and go invite a few people to coffee this week.
Yeah.
You might just need to go reconnect with real people and check in with them and talk about March Madness or whatever it was, right? Or something, the new baseball season that's unfolding and how bad the Mariners are doing right now and whatever. But like, just go engage with people. That might be what you need. And I would say another thing that is sort of related is if you find yourself looking across town at the other pastor across town whose church you think is growing and is doing so well, and you feel like you're failing. And so just being careful with some of that stuff, and kind of those joy killers. So being aware of what's draining your joy is really important to recapturing your joy at work. And then what are some things that we can do to cultivate joy at work? And you pointed to this already. Why did you do this in the first place?
Yeah.
What was the purpose in pursuing this calling? And Jason, how long are you in ministry now? We're about 16 years in, something like that.
Well, pastoral ministry. Yeah.
We were both I was in college ministry before seminary. You were working in youth ministry before. It's a long time to be serving in the church, in the congregational setting and those kinds of things. And so what was the purpose? What was the why for you to get into ministry? What was it?
So mine was, I felt it happened the same time I came to Jesus, because I was at camp. I've told that story before, but I was thrust into ministry as a literally hours old believer. And the reason was I felt like, again, back to those fire in the bones, I felt like I couldn't not do it. I was supposed to do and to share that. And that fire I had drove me really hard in ministry in the best way.
Yeah.
And I will say there are certainly times when that fire has gotten really low.
Yeah.
In the course of life and ministry. So, yeah. How about you? What was the thing that kind of drove you? I know your dad was in ministry.
Yeah, my dad was in ministry. I always thought that I would not be in ministry. I was on the law school track, and I remember it was Mike Gaffney or someone in the college ministry that I was connected to at UPC in Seattle basically said, if there's anything else you can do, you should do that. But if not, and if ministry is what the Lord's going to call you to, then you're going to, this is the direction that God's going to call you in, and it'll be clear. And for me, it was through the voices of people in my life that were saying, yeah, you would be awesome as an attorney, and maybe you go work for the International Justice Mission or whatever I was dreaming about as a 20-year-old. But they said, but you have so much gifting and the things that we think would really set you up for success and set the church up for success. And I think the Lord's calling you this way. So for me, it was really through the voices of people in my life saying, you need to give ministry a try. Just give God an opportunity, see if it's a fit. And as I set aside law school for a year, I went and served as an intern in college ministry for a year. And then at the end of that year, my boss there, Dave Burke, who we had on the podcast a while back, he said, I think you need to give God another year. And then that year turned into a career in ministry. And so it was almost like I couldn't escape that calling that God had in my life to serve in this way. And I would just encourage each pastor, it's sort of the Esther idea, right? That you're called to such a time as this, for this purpose, this moment, that you are unique and equipped to do this work, and that God is with you in this work. So reconnect with your purpose, the why you began this good work in the first place. And what's that about? What's your story? And even just sharing our stories here, you can feel us kind of lighten up a little bit and lift our spirits a little bit. So I would say reflect on your purpose or the why. How did you get here, and how did the Lord call you into this work? And then maybe reflecting on moments when you have made a difference. Like, going, oh, I'm not a complete failure. I mean, I'm not a complete success either, but I'm not a complete failure. And here's the good things that have happened that God has done and how God has worked in and through me. A couple other things I'd mention here too, and these are all things that we all know, but we need reminders about. Create life-giving rhythms.
Yeah. Create
moments and build into your schedule moments that bring you some joy, like going on a walk, like instead of meeting at a table in your office, go on a walk together and talk about life. Have a time where you just go and you listen to some good music that you love. I don't know. What are you listening to right now, Jason? You're a music guy.
Yeah, it's Stevie Ray Vaughan this time of year. I love
Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Stevie Ray Vaughan. That's what I'm listening to, man.
I'm listening to Forrest Frank every day with my kids. I don't know if you know that name out there, but I'm like, how am I listening to Forrest Frank right now? I should be listening to Chris Tomlin, because that's my generation. But
I love it. I love it. Well, and I would say too, with stuff that you love, it made me think about it when you're talking about spending time with people. Last week, we were invited to sit at a table at a fundraiser, with friends of ours from town that, all of our kids all grew up together. They all play football together. And so we've spent a lot of time together, and we all sat at this table together, and a couple of them go to church, but most of them don't. And I got to tell you, it was so great just spending time with folks and just reconnecting and talking. It actually, that time away from the normal church conversations with other friends, really did something for me coming back to work in the next week. I don't know what it is, but it's a certain form of rest with others.
Yeah. And that
builds you up.
That's it. It's finding those life-giving things that you're going to build into your life that do give you a sense of rest and rejuvenation and kind of recapturing joy. And I said yes to something that I thought I was done saying yes to this spring, and that's coaching baseball. I really thought I'd gotten to the finish line
They
on that
keep
one.
reeling me back in.
And this coach called and was like, hey, we really need your help, whatever. And we have like 6 assistant coaches, by the way, so they didn't need my help. But I'm having a blast. Like I go, this is something though, even though it's another thing on my calendar, it is something that brings me some joy and some rest. And I've been on a baseball field my whole life. And so it feels like home in a different kind of way. So finding some of those things, who can you laugh with? You mentioned getting together when we were just having fun, laughing about our CPE days at Robert Wood Johnson and just having a good time.
There's nothing not funny about those days, by the way.
Oh man, it's so incredible, right? And so in order to create space for that, you got to protect the margin in your life. And again, it's funny to me, I didn't notice this until we just started talking through it. There's a lot of time management that's built into recapturing joy and reconnecting with our purpose. And you got to have some room around the edges. If you're just packed to the gills with to-do lists and responsibilities, it's going to be hard to do that. So create some life-giving rhythms, or find some things that you love to do and do those things and create margin for them. And then third one is, and we've already alluded to this multiple times, but invest in relationships.
Yeah.
Ministry is relational at its core. And if you lose connection with that, your joy will go away. Otherwise, what's it for? And so whether it's somebody outside of your church, a colleague like you and I getting to catch up, or even someone in the congregation that maybe you were on a committee with years ago, but you haven't spent a lot of time with lately, but you enjoyed that relationship, go back, reconnect with them, re-engage, and remember that joy often comes from people, not tasks. Just, it feels good to check things off your to-do list. I get that. It's not the same of reconnecting or connecting with a person and finding the joy of that relationship. Let's see. Lastly, maybe throw this in there, is find the things that you can be grateful for. And I don't know, this is maybe a little Magoo or I don't know, self-helpy, but just maybe write down 3 things that you're grateful for every day. What are you grateful for about the work that you get to do that's unique to you, that the Lord has called you to? What is good about it? And what are you grateful for about that? And write those things down. And if you keep a list going on of your gratitude list like that, I think it really does have an effect. I kind of roll my eyes at that kind of stuff sometimes, Jason, but I think it can really be helpful just to kind of keep track of the things that you do appreciate and enjoy about your work. And I think some of those things are relational things. Other things are, we get to be creative all the time. Sometimes that's drudgery because we got to come up with another thing. But in what world do you get to craft a sermon every week and share it with people and they have to sit there and listen? I mean, like, how cool is that?
Yeah.
And what world do you get to sit around and read books that you're interested in and study things? And in what world do you get to go hang out with people you like and go to coffee and go to lunch and eat tacos with them and talk about their life? And in what world do you get to have some flexibility to go and do things like coach Little League, right? So there's a lot to be grateful for. And if we can come back to cultivate some of the things that we do love and enjoy about our work and that we are grateful for, that are unique to the work that we get to do, that we're called to, I think that helps with our joy as well. So just a few things that we can do to recapture some of that joy. And I think one additional way to put it is to remember that joy isn't necessarily a feeling either. It's something that we can cultivate and really connect with. That's kind of our core in our identity as followers of Jesus, that the joy that he's going to give. And so it's not a feeling that we can just go, I need to generate some joy. It's joy that comes when we reconnect with our purpose, find the meaning in our relationships, cultivate life-giving habits, and then, write those dorky gratitude lists that help us remember why we like to do.
Well, again, I'm going to come back to the fire in the bones. It's sort of like this burning gratitude.
Definitely.
In no matter what season we're kind of going through.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes from abiding in Jesus, and it comes from having these kind of healthy boundaries and practices, but it's so important. And I know that joy is not the same thing as fun, but I just as an
it's close.
Addendum,
it's close.
I would say make sure in ministry there's an element of fun. I think here's what can happen. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but what I've seen in a lot of churches, especially when you're having some significant struggles, is everything becomes so serious.
Yes.
And it's not like the work of Jesus isn't serious, but if on some level there isn't a little levity from time to time, what are we doing? If there isn't an element of fun in the way that we gather and be God's community together, maybe that's a missing piece that will help face the challenges in the first place.
Take yourself a little less seriously,
Yeah.
joke around a little bit, have a good time. That's part of being a really healthy community too. I think joy in that sense is something that you can choose, that you can protect, that you can cultivate as you do some of these things that we've been talking about. And so maybe the question we'll land with is something like this. What can you do this week, or what brings you joy that you can do more of this week than you did last week? Maybe it's just one thing that you start with. What brings you joy, and how can you do more of it this week than you did last week? And kind of work from there. But I hope I love that picture of the fire and the bones. I heard a talk recently about coming close to the fire again and not wandering away from the fire. I mean, that's the true source of our joy, and some of these other things that we can do to kind of cultivate that joy and reconnect. So anyway, you can find joy again. If you lost it, go find it. Ask the Lord to help you do that. And I think you'll find a lot more meaning and kind of revitalization in your work as well.
You had me at eating tacos with friends. So
I love it.
I'm ready to go. Well, thanks everyone for listening. May you find joy in this next season of life and ministry. And as always, we're available if you have any questions or want to reach out to us, Jason or Jesse at reclaimleader.com. Thanks to all of our listeners who've been with us on this journey. And it's nice to kind of see welcome to all of our new listeners as well. Yeah. And we hope that this is helpful. If you find it helpful, share it with your colleagues or just have a conversation around it to help you sort of figure out how we're gonna do this in our church, or how am I gonna apply this in my life. So a little bit of accountability, I think, goes a long way. And I know that you and I, Jesse, have both experienced that big time. So thanks, everyone. And as we always say, ministry is hard. It is so much better when we do it together.